1,000 years ago, superstition and the sword ruled. It was a time of darkness. It was a world of fear. It was the age of gargoyles.
Back in medieval times, in what archaeologists refer to as the 1990s, Disney's animations were generally rather lighthearted in tone and subject matter. But, as we all know from historical tomes of the era, there was a bit of a paradigm shift. I'm not going to pretend like I'm a 90s expert, because I wasn't alive for most of it, but just taking a look back at other media from that time paints a rather clear picture. You had grunge, nu metal, gangster rap, industrial music, the Attitude Era of wrestling starting out later in the decade. You had games like Doom and Mortal Kombat going fucking nuts with blood and gore, relatively speaking. Vampire the Masquerade, which is definitely going to get its own video someday, giving goths and punks their own version of D&D. And the big one, at least in my experience, comic books. Marvel and DC were giving their characters the worst, edgiest costumes packed with guns and pockets and pouches and just way too much, trying to be as extreme as humanly possible.
Is this how you get your sick kicks?
What? It's just an ordinary crabby... Oh my goodness!
Though it did also give us some long-standing greats like Venom. It was such a massive influence on the industry that tons of creators splintered to do their own thing, with Image Comics being one of the biggest juggernauts of the decade. Spawn, The Max, and from Image's imprint Top Cow, Witchblade, and The Darkness, just to name a few. Hell, even Dark Horse had characters that were dark and gritty, but not quite in the extreme way. I wouldn't lump, say, Hellboy into this sort of comic zeitgeist. The landscape for comics was so chock full of trying to be edgy and quote-unquote serious that DC introduced the world to Lobo. He was intended to be a parody of the growing grim and gritty philosophies of the medium at the time, particularly lampooning characters like Punisher or Wolverine. The only problem with this is that fans loved Lobo so much that he became a rising star, and honestly, can you blame them? I mean shit, he's even Stan Lee's favorite DC character.
What's your favorite DC superhero?
DC?
Yeah.
Lobo.
You know, for now, let's put a pin in the whole parody of 90s comic tropes thing. It'll come up in a bit. The reason I bring all of this up is because even the absolute titan that is Disney couldn't avoid this. Of course, other cartoons of the decade were going in a dark and gothic-inspired direction like Batman the Animated Series, which remains to this day one of the greatest cartoons of all time. Only unique and original takes on this channel, I assure you. Disney's lineup in the first half of the 1990s was full of lighthearted shows with a focus on comedy, and they had episodes with self-contained stories and a consistent status quo that can be watched as standalone adventures. Goof Troop, DuckTales, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, among others, those are the main types of series you could expect to see on the Disney afternoon block of animation. This, of course, was changed with the creation of Gargoyles, which was a bit of a black sheep for the network at the time. Though there isn't a sole creator credit for the show, Greg Weisman, who you may also recognize from his work on Spectacular Spider-Man and Young Justice, and Frank Parr, best known for his contributions to Batman the Animated Series, X-Men Evolution, and Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, are credited as the supervising directors and the closest approximation, though Weisman is the de facto creator of the show. Gargoyles was a huge standout amongst other shows on the block, becoming so after initially being pitched as a more comedic, episodic series, much like the other programming on the channel at the time. While I do say in the title that this is a gothic horror action show, it isn't meant to be particularly scary, but rather adopts a lot of the storytelling devices and structure from the gothic horror genre. It was still, at the end of the day, a series intended to be viewed by a younger audience, even with its darker and more mature themes, storylines, and subject matters such as bigotry, prejudice, gun safety, mortality, and existentialism. It didn't water any of this down either, and really respected the audience's intelligence. Before I go into more detail about the series as a whole, I want to lay out a bit of groundwork for you, and also to rationalize why I'm even talking about it, since it really isn't intended to be horror by any means. While it doesn't particularly employ scares or overtly terrifying scenery, Gargoyles takes an absolute metric ton from Gothic fiction and especially Gothic horror. Viewer discretion is advised, because I'm about to enter some serious pretentious hack territory. Gothic horror, in broad strokes, is particularly defined by its romantic aesthetic of fear and other intense emotion, superstition and curses, supernatural and paranormal threats such as ghosts, vampires, and werewolves, and a sort of clash between the past and present. That is, whatever the present is at the time of writing. A lot of Gothic horror locales might be haunted or crumbling manors, claustrophobic castles, crypts, graveyards, and ruins. These settings all share a particular love for the Gothic revival aesthetic of architecture that was popular in and around the 19th century. If you think of any severely pointy building that could fit in either Castlevania or Warhammer 40k, it's probably been inspired by Gothic and Gothic revival architecture. Outside of the aesthetic-defining pointed arches and flying buttresses, another feature of Gothic architecture was a spout that was designed to keep rainwater from running down the building and eroding the stone and mortar, by conveying it from the roof and away from the building. I'll give you one guess as to what it was called. Yeah, I figured it's pretty obvious, but yeah, it's gargoyles. These spouts were built to spew the water from the gargoyles' mouths as a sort of decorative feature. Gargoyles, though highly debated by religious institutions at the time, were overall believed to frighten off evil spirits. Outside of this mainstream idea, however, other notions were held, such as the belief that gargoyles were not meant to ward off evil spirits, but the evil of humans with wicked intentions, or generally to stoke fear.
Take this one for example. It kind of looks like a wolf or a lion, and this one looks like a dragon.
Others even say that they're vessels for demonic possession. Given the wide number of takes on this subject, no singular one is definitive, but the first belief is the overall general main one, which directly ties to the portrayal of the characters in the show. In fact, up until the series debut in 1994, anytime gargoyles were utilized in media, they were often portrayed with their more sinister and evil variants. Gargoyles, the series, kind of codified the guardian monster element to a degree. Beyond the traditional Gothic horror elements, the series also draws a lot of inspiration from Shakespeare, whose plays, coincidentally, had a lot of influence on the early writers of Gothic fiction. There are several allusions, quotes, and direct adaptations of Shakespeare's work in the series, most notably the immortal adversary Macbeth, as well as a direct adaptation of Puck, Oberon, and Titania from A Midsummer Night's Dream. Overall, the influence of Gothic horror and its adjacent aesthetics, movements, and genres play a big role in defining the tone and style of Gargoyles, which was much unlike the other Disney properties at the time. So with all of the setup regarding stylistic influences in mind, I'm going to go over the actual story premise and characters of the series. The story of Gargoyles begins in the year 994 in Scotland. The titular Gargoyles, led by Goliath, the main POV character of the series as a whole, defend their home, Castle Wyvern, against regular attacks by Vikings. But a betrayal within the castle leads to a massacre of their entire clan, save for a small number of survivors. A spell is cast upon the remaining gargoyles due to a misunderstanding by the princess's advisor, the Magus, with the spell stipulating that the gargoyles will remain dormant in stone until the castle, quote, rises above the clouds. A pretty cut and dry spell. Surely there's no way that it could ever...
You know the answer to that, Owen. Pay a man enough, and he'll walk barefoot into hell.
This absolutely raw-ass line came from a show on the same channel that was airing fucking DuckTales. Just want you to chew on that for a second. This is David Xanatos, one of the first characters we're introduced to. More on him specifically later, but he gets the story going for the modern-day elements. In 1994, 1,000 years after the Gargoyles were put to sleep, Xanatos, a multi-billionaire CEO, purchased Castle Wyvern and moved it brick by brick to Manhattan in New York City. I know cartoons require a major suspension of disbelief, and I know that this is the same show where there's magic and a race of guardian monsters that turn to stone, but somehow, the idea of reassembling a castle brick by brick and putting it on top of a skyscraper is just so cartoony that it makes wizardry more realistic. Gotta admit, this shit's got style though. So Xanatos brings the castle above the clouds, which breaks the spell placed upon the Wyvern clan. Not long after their awakening, the castle is besieged by commandos. The battle causes chunks blown out of the castle to fall to the streets below, which alerts Detective Maza, who will serve as the series' second principal POV character alongside Goliath. We'll get to her. She makes her way to the building after the commandos leave with 3 data discs investigating the commotion caused by the battle. After snooping around the halls of the castle, she's spooked by running into Goliath and another of the Wyvern clan, falling off the building's edge only for Goliath to rescue her. Though he is distrustful of mankind after the betrayal 1,000 years prior, he agrees to learn about the city and the modern world through her. She also ends up naming Hudson the eldest of Wyvern clan after meeting him for the first time. After the dust had settled, Xanatos explained to the gargoyles what had been taken from the castle, and sent them each to split up and retrieve the stolen discs, alongside some backup in the form of Goliath's mate, Demona, also operating in the modern day. After their mission was completed, it's revealed that Xanatos had actually staged the attack on the castle, and that the 3 discs he wanted were actually property of Cyberbiotics, a rival corporation to Xanatos Enterprises. He used the data on the discs to finalize a series of completely obedient gargoyle robots modeled after Goliath, dubbed the Steel Clan, intending for the remaining gargoyles of the Wyvern Clan to be killed, having outlived their usefulness to Xanatos. The Steel Clan is destroyed, and Xanatos and Demona are defeated, the latter seemingly falling to her demise, though this is a Disney series after all, so she'll return as a recurring antagonist. This essentially sets up the main premise of the show. The gargoyles encountering enemies in the modern day, with Xanatos and Demona being the 2 primary antagonists. The first season mostly deals with enemies in and around New York, whereas the second season goes on a sort of world tour arc with Goliath, Elisa, Bronx, and the newly introduced Angela for a good portion of the season. There are still regular check-ins with the Manhattan Clan crew. The second season is substantially longer than the first, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. I don't want to discuss too much in the way of story, twists, and arcs because I want you to watch this series. If even one of you goes and checks this out because of the plot hooks, then I consider my work here a success. Though I won't go too much into detail about story arcs, I do want to cover some of the characters, starting with the Manhattan Clan, having renamed themselves after relocating to New York City, is composed of the aforementioned Goliath, Hudson, and Bronx. Goliath, the strong, compassionate, wise type, took over as the clan leader from Hudson before their 1,000-year sleep. He's usually the curious, level-headed type, but isn't above getting into a bit of a brutal scrap now and then. He's voiced by Keith David, adding another to his absolutely stacked roster of perfectly voiced characters. Hudson fills the role of the wise old mentor figure and was the Wyvern Clan's original leader before passing the torch to Goliath shortly before their stone slumber. He sort of embodies the grandfather archetype, happier to sit in a recliner watching TV than going out on any grand adventures. He was voiced by Ed Asner, who boasts a large filmography both in live action and voice work. The other members of the clan, like Hudson, also receive names based on places in New York City, though they choose these names themselves rather than being given one by Elisa, like in Hudson's case. Brooklyn is the cool one of the group. He's sarcastic, thrill-seeking, but also very tactical and more often than not operates as the sort of older brother of the clan, even becoming Goliath's second-in-command later on. He's voiced by Jeff Bennett, one of the most recognizable voices in the industry and not to be confused with the actor from Friday the 13th Part 7. Because this is a horror channel, I do feel like that's necessary to mention. Lexington is the smallest of the clan and the apparent most intelligent when it comes to machinery and modern-day technology. He's fascinated by it and is quick to analyze and understand gadgets and other tech of their new world. He's voiced by Tom Adcox Hernandez, who's most known for voicing DC's Clarion the Witch Boy in Young Justice and Tinkerer in Marvel's Spectacular Spider-Man, both shows also developed by Greg Weisman. Broadway, by contrast to Lexington, is the largest of the clan, not just in stature, but in terms of physical might. This is what peak performance looks like. Dude is an absolute bulking king, a real power lifter, one might say. Outside of being the muscle, Broadway is also sensitive with a heart of gold. He's voiced by Patrick Star himself, Bill Fagerbacke. One of the gargoyles, the last of the Manhattan Clan at the start of the series, is Bronx, who is more akin to a dog in terms of stature, but still recognized as an important member of the clan. I looked into this further, and his species is technically just called a gargoyle beast, that, while still following the same stone during the day quirk as other gargoyles, are technically a separate, semi-related species. He's voiced by the legendary Frank Welker, whose stacked filmography includes tons of other dogs like Scooby-Doo, Wonder Dog, Cujo, and Megatron. Rounding out the main cast of protagonists is Elisa Mazda, the sort of audience surrogate alongside Goliath. She's voiced by Sally Richardson Whitfield, who most notably starred in Eureka, Black Dynamite, and I Am Legend. She gets everyone accustomed to the modern day and helps them navigate their way through the hustle and bustle of New York City while dealing with problems of her own. She's quick-witted but impulsive, sometimes stubborn but kind-hearted. Wait a goddamn second. So you're telling me that there's a team of monstrous heroes who live in the shadows of New York City, made up of the leader, the muscle, the cool guy, the brains, and their old mentor, all accompanied by a human woman who befriends them? Is this just the fucking Ninja Turtles? Not that there's anything wrong with that, just I had no idea the similarities in premise were that similar. Give us a beat-em-up game like Turtles in Time or Shredder's Revenge Disney, and my life is yours. The Gargoyles have a pet though, so the comparison isn't one-to-one, especially not when it comes to As we know, the first 2 villains of the show have already been established as of the Awakening 5-parter that kicks off the series. The sort of de facto main antagonist is David Xanatos himself, and to an extent his assistant Owen. A villain so badass that he created a trope that gets its own TV tropes page, the Xanatos Gambit. Quote, a plan for which all foreseeable outcomes benefit the creator, including ones that superficially appear to be failure, as illustrated by this example. Xanatos is a practical sort of guy. He doesn't want to rule the world, but rather grow and maintain the power and influence he has with his greatest asset, the almighty dollar. He uses his vast wealth and resources to further his own goals or to create problems for the Gargoyles, such as when he recruits and upgrades the Pack, a group of mercenaries that double as TV stars. Their canine-themed monikers and costumes are reminiscent of overly armored or toyetic 90s comic book characters. Hey, see, I told you we'd put a pin in that whole 90s comics thing. These guys absolutely give off that vibe. They also serve as recurring antagonists for the Gargoyles to fight. Fox, the original leader of the team, also develops a romantic relationship with Xanatos, the two even having a son together.
But you might want to use some of this DI7 stuff to make sure your own house is clean.
Alex, can you say harassment? I knew that you could.
Back to Xanatos himself, though. He also wants to achieve immortality, since death is the one thing he seemingly can't find a way to control. He's not so much pure evil as he is just strongly immoral and unethical. He's put aside his own wants and desires to help the Gargoyles on a few occasions, even if the reasons are often selfish in nature. He's voiced marvelously by Jonathan Frakes of Star Trek fame. This is only the first of several Star Trek actors to appear in Gargoyles. Seriously, there's a huge-ass list, just take a look for yourself. Speaking of Star Trek...
I have a name too, Goliath. The humans gave it to me long ago. You should know it before you die. I am Demona.
Demona, the sort of final boss of the Gargoyles Rogues Gallery, is voiced by Marina Sirtis, who starred alongside Jonathan Frakes in Star Trek The Next Generation as Counselor Deanna Troi. She was once Goliath's mate before the betrayal at Castle Wyvern, but has become callous and bitter towards humanity due to their mistreatment of the Gargoyles, even prior to the destruction of most of the clan. She, over the centuries, has become downright genocidal towards humans, even after somewhat finding a sliver of redemption before her rage was made even greater. She's probably the most compelling of all the villains in the series. Though her distaste towards humanity for their mistreatment of Gargoyles is understandable, she is, at the end of the day, her own worst enemy. And a lot of it comes down to, as stated on the Gargoyles wiki, Demona's hatred of humanity is still fueled, in part, by her repressed guilt. She knows deep down inside that she is responsible, in part, for the Wyvern massacre, but is unwilling to consciously admit it, and makes the human race her scapegoat to avoid facing the blood on her hands.
Another human bites the dust. Or rather, turns to dust.
Jesus Christ.
Here, let me help you with those packages. Where does the time go?
I couldn't have put that better myself. She's got depth and isn't just comically evil, with a lot of complexity behind her. Also, I mean... Should I? No. That might be too easy. She also shows hints of compassion still within her, most notably when it involves her and Goliath's daughter, Angela. Demona is also unique in that, thanks to a spell put on her by Puck, she doesn't turn to stone during the day, instead turning human until nightfall.
Whoa. No, what are you doing? What are you doing? No, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop! No! Oh God, fuck!
This wouldn't be the only curse she's afflicted with, though. Demona's eternal life and youth can be attributed to a shared magical binding with the human Macbeth, who she had formed an alliance with during a big string of Game of Thrones type activities. When a battle was seemingly lost, the Weird Sisters, who have a recurring mysterious role in the show, offered to bind the two together, making Demona and Macbeth effectively immortal. With this, Macbeth became the King of Scotland with Demona as his primary advisor, repairing relations between humanity and Gargoyles for a bit, even softening Demona's hard nature for a time. However, due to Demona eavesdropping on a conversation and misinterpreting it as yet another sign of human betrayal, she and her clan deserted Macbeth, which created enough of a weakness for Macbeth to be usurped as king. After his death on the battlefield, Macbeth became a solitary wanderer, pursuing Demona for centuries, having grown tired and weary from his inhumanly long life. The only way for him to die, and thus truly be at peace, is to slay Demona or for her to slay him. He's also the one that gave Demona her name. Macbeth is voiced by John Rhys-Davies, most famously known as Gimli from Lord of the Rings, aka the best character in that trilogy. Outside of these main contenders, there are a lot of one-off villains and supporting antagonists, but these are sort of the trinity of antagonists for the show. The show ended after a 13-episode first season and a whopping 52-episode second season. Okay, gotta address the elephant in the room. There is technically a third season called The Goliath Chronicles, but there's a big-ass asterisk next to that statement. So outside of, like, the first episode of this series, Greg Weisman and a huge chunk of the original behind-the-scenes crew, including producers and story editors, were replaced, and the dip in quality is very noticeable. Weisman himself, as well as fans of the series, don't consider this to be canon, so I won't either. Weisman did have a consultant credit for this season, but as he put it, still, the only contributions that I made of any real merit were negatives. Please don't do that. Things you don't see on the screen, because I advised against it. Giving me credit for what you did see seemed unfair, both to me and the people who actually did the work. What I consider to be the series finale, the three-parter Hunter's Moon, is a satisfying enough conclusion that I straight up do not recommend watching the Goliath Chronicles, though Weisman himself does consider the first episode of that season to be canon, so give that one a watch too if you want, even if it doesn't feel like a finale to cap off the series. The show isn't the end of the continuity, however, and the characters will find new life in comics published by SLG from 2006 to 2009, and newer comics published by Dynamite Entertainment from 2022 to present. Hell, the newest issue as of the time of recording came out on June 7th of this year, with Gargoyles Demona #1. All of the comics from both publishers are written by Weisman himself. Gotta love this level of dedication. Also, they're doing a Fantastic Four crossover this October. It's kind of badass. Call me a fake fan, but I only found out about these while writing this video, and I plan to read them if I can find a convenient way to get my hands on them. So that's all well and good, sure, but this show was so loved that there was an entire convention held for fans of it from 1997 to 2009. I don't know exactly what the turnout was for that, but that's definitely emblematic of people really liking this series. How come there aren't any new mainstream appearances in movies, animation, video games, or something else? Other Disney shows have included nods to Gargoyles, including the 2017 DuckTales, which features a straight-up use of the Gargoyles opening theme.
I swore I would never do this again. Hold this for me.
And Amphibia, featuring a Vitruvian Man-style drawing of Goliath. Series creator Matt Braley even cites Gargoyles as an inspiration for the series' story and voice work. He's so real for that. I hear this is similar to The Owl House, which I enjoyed, so maybe this will be what gets me to finally give Amphibia a try. Also, Keith David does voice work in both of these shows, so it's even more appropriate. There were also rumblings of Jordan Peele pitching a Gargoyles live-action movie. It seems to just be reports and nothing officially stated, but it's baffling that this was passed up on if the reports are true. Then again, there were hopes to make a live-action Gargoyles movie since 1995. Goliath could have looked like this. Is this what you would have wanted? Who knows though. After all, in 2023, horror icons James Wan and Gary Dauberman announced that they were working on a live-action reboot series for Disney+. I hope it doesn't get stuck in development limbo, because I'll take the chance at more Gargoyles stuff in whatever form it takes, even if it might not end up being as good as the original. Honestly, I think that's just about all I've got to talk about for this one. I recommend you watch the series, as it's one I hold in very high regard. If you like comics, hell, I hear those are good. I think I've covered just about everything from a broad stroke standpoint, unless you want me to talk about the Sega Genesis game. I have no comment on that. Haven't played it, don't feel like it. Anyways, thank you for bearing with me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, watch the series so Disney remembers that the property exists, puts them in Kingdom Hearts or something, yada yada yada. Have a good one.